Hey everybody, what's going on? So we are back here covering The Walking Dead for the first time in a while, but I would say on time because we are rapidly approaching the second anniversary of the series ending, which I didn't even realize when we
Is it
started
really?
this
Wow.
idea. Yeah. I think we're by the time people watch this, we'll be just a couple of days away. It was November
Nice.
20th of 2022.
Okay.
So we're gonna do a bit of a retrospective here. We're gonna take a look at every season of the main show, none of the spinoffs. We'll probably take a look at that in a later video the next time we get one, which we'll definitely will. This is AMC. They're not,
Yeah.
this franchise is not going anywhere. So don't worry, we'll get to those eventually. But today we just want to take a look at every season of the main series. So it looks like it's a little out of order here in the tier list, which is okay. We'll kind of bounce around a little bit and we'll see at the end where they all come along. So the first one we've got to rank here is season 1. Tyler, what are you thinking on season 1?
I think what helped it the most is how short it was. I think it was able to
Mm-hmm.
stay really confined and really focused. Also, the cast of characters doesn't get too bloated here. And we're really able to invest in the characters we see. Now we see the greatest grenade explosion in the history of the world at the end of this thing.
Oh yeah. Oh my god, I forgot about that crazy CGI. Yeah, there's some low budget moments in this season for
Yeah.
sure.
I like this season. I don't think it's the best season of The Walking
No,
Dead, but
definitely
I
not.
I like it. I think it gets it off to a strong start. There's a reason the show became as big as it did, partly because it started so well. I don't know where you at here.
I'm hovering between good to great. I think
Yeah.
I agree with you that it started an incredibly solid foundation. We had really interesting characters and a great premise. I mean, that pilot episode I think is one of the best episodes in TV ever, just as far as how it
Mhm.
introduces you to that world and that stakes. That being said, there are definitely some moments where you can tell they're trying to find their footing. I think some of
Oh,
the
sure.
performances and character dynamics aren't quite where they need to be yet. Rick Grimes' accent is kind of slipping a little bit, so
Yeah.
Andrew Lincoln gets into the British a little too hard sometimes. But I think it's really interesting in the context of the whole show because it almost feels more like an HBO miniseries than it does like the epic cable drama it would become.
Yeah. I would agree with that. So good. I think we're set on that.
That works for
Okay.
me.
Works for me.
Next one here is looking like it's season 10. So that was a bit of an odd one. I am leaning towards, I think this is a meh. I don't think it's awful because I think the season is just kind of forgettable, aside from the Whisperers stuff, which was really cool and really cool to see on screen. But I do think like this is the season where you feel the absence of Rick Grimes and a couple other characters who have left the show the most. I think this is where Michonne leaves as well.
Yes.
So it's, I don't know, it kind of feels like they're treading water. It doesn't have a ton of new ideas, but the Whisperer arc is really cool. And I think
Is this the Negan redemption arc
yes, and
season? Yeah.
right. And the weird thing about this one too is I don't know. So they did the COVID episodes at the end. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
So they did like the production got delayed because I believe that folks in chat correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that like the season finale was supposed to air like 2 weeks after the pandemic and they
Mhm.
weren't done with it. So they delayed it by a bunch and then they made all of these bottle episodes, which I feel like the biggest complaint people have against The Walking Dead are that there's so many episodes where they're just like milling about in the Georgia woods and nothing happens. This is where they get that really weird love story arc with Daryl and Leah.
Yeah.
Um,
Where are you with those like really hyper focused character episodes where you just take one or two characters and you're really honing in on them? What season 4 or 5 did it a lot too, right?
four, I
Um,
would say, right back half of four
yeah.
after they all, the
Well, they were
prison just.
on their way to Terminus,
Yep, yeah, that's
basically.
back
Yep.
half of season
Yeah.
4. Yep.
So where are you at with those? Are you okay with them or?
I think it honestly really depends on the context of what in the season surrounds it, which I know is kind of a cop out answer. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think it depends on the pacing of the season and also I think with Walking Dead has an issue where a lot of times it's so obvious they're going to kill a character off because they start focusing on a character for the first time, like really ever. They always
Yeah.
do that. The episode someone's going
Yes.
to die, the whole episode is, the whoever show. So
Hmm. I totally agree, and that's not the first show to do that. Like many shows have taken that approach over time, but
Mhm.
I definitely agree. I'm a fan of good character writing and good like character exploration, so I liked a lot of them, especially the season 4 ones.
Mhm.
Season 10, I can definitely go with you here though. I feel like meh is the right place for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What are you thinking for season 11 next up here? It's such a mixed bag, isn't it? It's a really hard one
yeah.
to come down on.
This is where like I don't know if nostalgia is the right word, but
Mhm.
the feelings I've had, like I spent a decade with this show, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you did as well, and it holds that special place. Why we're still talking about it today, and you just have those memory lane things as you go through what you know is the final season, and I guess the fan in me chose to see the good in it.
Mhm.
It's not definitely not perfect, not even in top half, I would say, but
Agreed.
I think it's solid enough. I think what they did, Hayden, is they got to a point where they had to start setting up for all these spinoffs that had already been announced.
Yeah, which took a lot of the momentum and stakes away, right?
Yep,
Where you already knew that by this point, Daryl, Carol, Negan, Maggie, Rick, and Michonne were all gonna
survive.
make it out, right?
Yep. So that takes a lot away from a show that largely is built, this one in Game of Thrones, on the idea that you had no idea who was going to die at any time.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, um, and
And
sometimes they stayed with the comics and sometimes not.
mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and
So
I feel like for the final season, the stakes should have been the highest they ever have, and I feel like they've never been lower. And
yeah.
I think that was mainly due to, what we were just talking about with AMC kind of marketing the spinoffs before the main series even ended. I will say though, it's such a weird mixed bag because I feel like you get this is the longest season of the show ever because you got
Yep.
3 blocks of those
What,
8
24 episodes
episode
or 22?
mid seasons. Yeah, 24,
Yeah.
I believe. So,
Yeah.
and I think the first one wasn't all that great. I think you still had some of the issues of season 10 present. And
Hmm.
that arc with the Reapers was just kind of really weird and never went anywhere. I feel like
Yep.
no one really remembers or talks about them very much. But I do think the final 8 bunch of episodes were pretty good. And they stuck the landing, which I think is the most important thing to do, and establish some new traditions, right? Where we got the variant walkers, we got the
Mhm.
weekly F bomb, which was pretty
Right.
fun. And it was nice for them to not, be scared of using coarse language in what is probably the most violent TV show in American
And like
history.
most dire circumstances, you have to think like if I'm in this scenario, I'm dropping
Mm-hmm.
F bombs, Hayden.
Oh,
Like
for
there's
sure.
no
The
way I'm
filter's
not.
off.
Yeah.
Filter's off. So here's my thing. I feel like I'm kind of between meh and good on this, but I think I would put it at the bottom of good for now because they
Yeah.
stuck the landing. The finale was really great and emotional and gave us those like very obvious just a teaser for the ones who live. I mean, they even said the ones who live. Like the whole cast said the ones who live, even ones who didn't live in that
And
ending
yeah,
scene. But it was such a great montage that I think really
yeah.
tied the main series together while still giving us a lot to look forward to.
Speaking
So,
of the weekly F bomb, what brings this season home for me is Daryl gets one of the best lines, best like monologues of the entire series, in my opinion.
mm-hmm,
When they're talking about how they want to take everything back to the way it was, and he's like, "That's your effing problem.
mm-hmm,
You want everything to be the way it was, and or whatever."
mm-hmm,
And I thought that was really poignant and powerful. That like shows like this always tell us something about our own world, and
mm-hmm,
that was one of those moments. So yeah, especially since the time when that show came out, it was still a pretty turbulent time in terms of coming out of the COVID pandemic and
mm-hmm.
in a political time that, surprise hasn't gotten any better since, but was
Yeah.
still pretty, divided. We were at the height of that. So,
Yeah, I mean, hearing
you
that
know,
in the ass end of a pandemic 2 weeks after a midterm election was
yeah.
pretty good
So,
timing, not gonna
yep.
lie.
So I did enjoy that, and I also enjoyed the finale parts of it. I think they
Mm-hmm.
tried to bring back some of the classic zombie scenes and some of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff, which was nice. I think it was
Yeah,
pulled
some
some
really
good
emotional
punches.
deaths too, killing off
Yep,
Rosita and Luke, which
yep,
Luke is a side character I really grew to love, and Rosita is one of those ones that like she's kind of always been there, and you forget that because she was introduced in season 4, which to me is like kind of recent or kind of late in the show, but it's really not. I mean, she was in it for over 2/3 of the show, and I believe I heard a stat at one point that she is in more individual episodes than Rick Grimes, which is crazy to
Wow,
think
really?
about. Yeah, because
Okay.
think about it, she was there for a
Yeah,
whole 2 seasons longer, 2.5 than he was, and they were the longest season. So
yeah. All right.
it's wild.
What's up next?
Looking like season 2 here with Rick running to the farm. I feel like this is the most interesting season to talk about because I think it has had the biggest gap in how people feel about it
Agree.
over time.
Where are you here?
Oh, I love it. I think
I
it's
do too.
S. I think it's S. I really do. Week to week, the looking for Sophia moments were not, it was a bit of a slow pace, but I mean, I think like
But the
this is
payoff for
really
that, Hayden.
so worth it. That scene is incredible. That scene
Yeah.
sets up Carol's arc for not just the rest of the series, but the rest of the franchise, right? And who she is.
It also played a huge
Going into
role
season 2.
in Shane's descent, right? And
Mm-hmm.
which was an arc throughout that season.
Yeah, and I mean, really gave us our first human villain that season with Shane,
Yep.
right? And so, I mean, I think the character drama, the human emotional drama here, I think is the best it's probably is in the whole show.
I agree. And partly I think because the cast is still small enough that you can really invest in the characters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I
For
do think
sure.
later, as the cast gets a little more bloated or just bigger, it's harder to
Mm-hmm.
do that. But
Yeah, I mean, we get some new additions. We get a lot this season with
we do.
Herschel's family, but I think
Yeah.
they're all just stellar. And I think it rounds out too because we have some really meaningful character deaths as
Hmm.
well to balance that out with
Yeah. Dale.
Sophia and Dale, especially the
Yeah.
big one, right? Which was, I think, at that point probably one of the biggest departures from the comics. Both those two deaths.
Hmm. Is Dale a like divisive character? Like, are some fans annoyed by him and some not? Or is it?
I don't think so. I mean, I hear a lot of love for him online, and I think the people that do kind of pick on him do it a little lovingly. But I mean, I've still got love
Yeah.
for Dale. I've got his RV right there when AMC
Nice.
did
There
knock
you
off
go.
Lego sets for a
Oh,
year and
nice.
a half.
There you go. Yeah, I like Dale. I could like I understand the nagginess getting to almost any character, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um I do like the character too. He's one of those characters where the heart's in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, he's really the last moral holdout in the series. And I
Yeah.
think he passes the baton or the torch, so to speak, really well for Herschel to take that role in seasons 3 and 4 after
Yeah.
he dies.
Yeah. Really good point. Okay. What's up next?
Season 3. So now we're going in order, it looks like, from
For a
here
minute
on
anyway.
out.
Are we?
Yeah,
Okay. Excellent.
I think so. Yeah. So season 3,
Blame
I
the tier
think,
makers.
yeah,
Because
this is not on
yeah.
us.
Yeah.
We should have made our own, but we're busy people. Shout out to tier makers, but also fix your shit.
Right.
But yeah, I think season 3 was like where the show, I think, reached its first peak and it became like a big league, like action blockbuster. Because now not only do we have a human villain, we had a human villain faction, right? Where we
Yeah.
essentially go to war of Rick's group versus the governor
Woodbury.
and
Yeah.
Woodbury. Yeah. And I think that like they do a really good job getting into that quickly. I mean, we see the governor pretty much right away. We see Michonne pretty much right away. And we get to the prison, I believe, in the first episode, first couple minutes of the first episode. And
Because we see it
like
at the
we're
end
there
of
for a long
season
time.
2, right? It's the closing
Yes.
shot of season 2.
Yeah, they do a little
Yeah.
teaser cliffhanger, which fans of the comics were like, "Oh shit, here we go." We're
Yeah.
that's a really loved era of, I think, both at this point, the show and the
Yeah, and
comic.
deservedly so because it's in my opinion the high point of the series. And one of
Ooh,
them anyway.
okay.
Um, I love the prison era. I love season 3 and 4 for the most
Hmm.
part. The I think the governor is such an exceptional villain
For sure.
because he's got the calmness about him
Hmm.
that makes somebody truly scary. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a reason that Hannibal Lecter is creepy as shit, Hayden. It's because Hannibal
So
Lecter speaks in this
calculated.
really soft spoken and all, but just
Mhm.
will at the same time do the most heinous evil things.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's something about that that's really impactful and like just beautifully acted. There's some really good, well, varying returns, but there are some
Mhm.
novels that tell the governor's backstory.
Yeah.
And encourage checking those out too.
How do you feel about the Merle comeback this season?
I mean, I liked it because I like Merle.
Yeah. In like a weird, like you love to hate him way. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
he's an interesting magnet for why can't I think of his name? Daryl.
Yeah, he's a
Uh
great foil for sure.
he he's like this magnet pulling him back to the dark side, because
Mhm.
Daryl has one of, if not the biggest character arc over the course of the series.
Mhm.
And whenever Merle shows back up, there's this pull on him to go back to what
To
he was.
regress.
Yep.
Right. Right.
And I think that's probably the most interesting part of Merle being there. And it's always kind of nice to see because whenever Daryl, it's like whenever it gets too good, Hayden Merle shows up, and then here we go,
Mhm.
right?
And the
Oh,
bayonet arm is just so cool.
oh, I know.
That was such a fun little it's very iconic. I mean, even still, like when they started reprinting Walking Dead action figures earlier this year, like Merle with the cap and the bayonet on his arm was like
Yep,
one of the first figures they did.
yep.
So
It is cool.
fans got a lot of love for that character.
So
I
where are you
think
putting?
season
Yeah,
3 had some lowlights though.
yeah,
I think mainly in I really don't like what they did with I feel like they kind of made Andrea almost an incompetent character and she was
yeah.
making a lot of very selfish decisions that I think went against not just how she is in the comics, but who she had been proven to be so far in the series. And I think there are some
Mhm.
pacing issues which take this from S down to great for me. But there are definitely some S tier episodes, like the one where Lori dies and
Yeah,
Rick just totally snaps and becomes a totally different person from then on out. And it usurped like people talk a lot about with The Walking Dead, the 1-8-9-16 problem, which is that like basically things only happen in season premieres, finales, or mid-season premieres and
hmm,
finales. And I
yeah,
think season 3 did a really good job of circumventing that because there's some really crazy shit that goes down, like the episode where Lori dies, who at that point is the protagonist's wife, right? She's a very, very
she's a major
central
character.
character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Did you feel like that was a good call?
Yeah. I mean, I think it
I
was
did.
kind of a necessary call for him as a character to kind of evolve because I mean, like, both for his journey, but also like Rick and Lori are not really great to each other. And on
No,
rewatch, like, it makes him kind of unlikable and hard to root for at times because he's just very mean and distant to her. And I understand they've went through a lot with the
yeah,
whole cheating thing of her thinking Shane is dead and he's not, and that's kind of all of the soap opera-y stuff around that love
yeah.
triangle.
He is not great to her. She's also very questioning of everything he does. It feels
Mhm.
like, and
Mhm.
I feel like every story, every arc that took place, and every like mini thing, it played out the exact same way. Where Rick makes a decision, Lori bugs him about whether or not it's the right decision for 40 minutes, and then something happens.
And then it
You know,
turns out to be the right decision.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that's kind of where
Yep.
we just got into the cycle. It's like The Simpsons, like Marge always like trying to redirect Homer every Sunday night, Um,
Mhm.
so I felt like the best use for that character at that point. It's not the character wasn't well acted or anything. It
Mhm.
was. It's just the best use of that is the shock value of that moment. And
Mhm.
it also changed Carl's trajectory.
Oh, big time. You know what? I think you've convinced me to throw it in S.
Okay.
I would say throw it in S behind season 2.
I would agree with that. And I want to say one thing too on oh, I can't remember her name right now. You just mentioned it, like where it made her look like she's stupid.
Andrea, yeah.
Andrea, yeah, sorry. So Andrea, I think this is a great like it's the governor's putting on a masterclass in manipulation. It's almost Palpatine-esque
Mhm.
where he sees they've been planting the seeds for 2 seasons that all Andrea wants is like respect and a place at the table and to be treated like one of the boys and all that, all that type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And the governor kind of gives her that. And when he does that, she's all in with them, and he's
Mm-hmm.
able to manipulate her as a result, right? Like he draws her in, gets her there. And I think that leads to some of the not so bright decisions that we see. But when you're in that bubble and it's like, this person believes in me and I'm all in whatever this cause is, like you don't see that.
Right, right.
So I think, but she comes around at the end too late. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like Vader, little
Mm-hmm.
late in the game, but there was no lightning here or throwing anybody down a hole, but it was, you know,
I'm trying to
not
think
like
if there
Return of the
is
Jedi.
throwing someone down a hole.
Not involving her anyway.
Somewhere in the show. Oh, there's the
Yeah.
well walker. That's what I'm thinking
Yeah.
of.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
So, but yeah, I do really enjoy season 3. So
What do you think of season 4?
I think the problem you brought up earlier, season 4 is a great example.
Which one?
The 1, 8, 9, 16.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
we
it's
know where we're going the
we
whole
sure
time.
do. Yep.
And it's just a matter of getting there. It's the first like 6, 7 episodes are just moving all the pieces on the board to get us to.
To get the governor to destroy the prison.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, to get the governors come back, and it's kind of weird how slow and meandery they are about it. And they give him like 1 or 2 episodes, like entire episodes of backstory as well.
Yeah.
Not even backstory, because it's in between seasons 3 and 4. It's just what he is and what he does. And I think that's a really interesting concept, but I think it kind of gets away from they lose the plot a bit, but then again, like I don't know what you would even tell in that time because this is the safest I think the group ever is and feels.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the prison's been secured, they've got the people from Woodbury there, like who've moved in, right? They're taking care of elders and children. A lot of red shirts this season, by the way. A lot of random small characters that are just in the background and
Yep.
in the lunch line, and then I guess just die off screen
Right.
at
I know.
some point. None of them happen to escape the prison. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this one, I think this is still on the very tail end of when like sweeps week was a thing
Mm-hmm.
where, these networks would try to get the big episodes in like February and then again in May. In
Okay.
order, because that's when that was like the big season, those 2 weeks, one in February, one in May, when ratings were measured in order to get ad buys.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know
So
that.
back before then, like shows like the X-Files, etc., they'd always have their biggest episodes in that mid-season, like February range, and then
Mm-hmm.
again in May.
Okay.
So that's when the smoking man would show up on the X-Files and all that type of thing. But I think here we're at the very, very tail end of that because we're just starting to like the whole streaming every show is really becoming mainstream. Hulu's coming into play, things like that.
Netflix, right?
Yeah, Netflix and etc. And people are just waiting to watch the entire season on
Yeah, I mean, at
Netflix.
this point, I knew a lot of people already who were waiting for
Yeah,
the whole season to be out on Netflix. I will say though, I think there are some really good standout examples of like how you do an isolated one-off episode in this
yeah,
because everyone's kind of split out on the road to Terminus. And so we get like really interesting dynamics explored that by the time everyone's together, these characters feel so much better. You've got the Greydom group, right? With Eugene, Abraham, Maggie, Tara, Glenn. You've got like all of that going on, right? All of that at play. You've got Carol and Tyrese taking care of the kids, which leads to the
mm-hmm.
Grove, which is probably the most devastating
Oh,
episode
it's so good
of the
though.
series. Carol loses another kid.
Yeah, but it's like
Spoiler alert.
devastating, but it's really good.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. And then that finale where it's just like probably I think the best cliffhanger in the show, where you get everyone in the train car at Terminus. You have to reveal they're
We
cannibals. You're
weren't at
like,
the weekly F bomb yet, so we couldn't get the quote at the
they
end.
did it in Blu-ray. The Blu-ray's got
Okay,
it. They did
does it?
record it.
Okay.
Yeah. But you get that moment where they're in the train car and everyone's screwed and Rick's like pacing back and forth doing the head tilt. Like he's like looks like a feral animal,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. He goes, they're gonna feel pretty stupid when they find out. Abraham's like, find out what? he turns to the camera, and it's this really good shot where the way the shadow is, it almost gives him the governor's eye patch,
Mhm.
and he's like, they're screwing with the wrong people. And that's when like Murder Jacket Rick is born. He's obviously been wearing the
Yeah,
murder jacket for a
it
couple seasons or a couple episodes at this point, but that's when he really becomes. That's when he goes full send into it.
it's like, yeah, he's really back at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, and you're right, we're on the path to that version of Rick Grimes. So, I don't know, where do you rank this one?
I would say great.
I would too. I think season 4, it has its slip ups, and I know it's pretty split on the back half of the season, but
Mm-hmm.
I really like those like character deep episodes, and I think they added a lot because, like, again, we knew we're just in a holding pattern again to get to the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think they did a lot with it, so I'll take it. All right, where are we off to? Season 5?
I'm just going with a bold claim. I think season 5 is the best series or best season
Okay,
of the series.
okay.
And
How come?
it starts with the very beginning, right? You get this really, really incredible episode where they're breaking out of Terminus, which I think is still the most watched episode. And it's just this
That makes sense.
incredible action-packed blockbuster cliffhanger delivery, right? And you just see Rick being absolutely ruthless. He gets his iconic AK and just really goes like full send, and he has to be convinced by other people like to not go back there and finish it,
Mhm.
right? They're like, it's over, like let the walkers take care of them, and that's not enough for him. Like he becomes so obsessed with the idea of protecting the people that he loves that he forgets to actually like be present for his children, which is a really interesting dynamic. I think this is where you get um, and then from then on, right after this big win, like the group is at their probably lowest point yet, where they're just on the road, struggling and suffering and starving for like weeks. And you get that, where the Walking Dead speech, where Rick talks about, um, how his grandfather told him when he was in World War II, every day he would get up and be like, rest in peace, get up, go to war. Like, you get to live after this is over, which is such a nihilistic, necessary worldview at the moment. And it's fascinating that Daryl is the one who pushes back against it. Like that's just such an interesting dynamic there. And I think this is where,
Which
after the end
makes
of
the
season
phrase "the ones
four,
who live" more impactful, by the way, right?
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
yep.
Um, and I think that's when Michonne says it in the first time at some point in season 5.
Mhm.
I could be wrong, but then we get to Alexandria, which is such a departure for the show because it's the safest place they ever get to. And like at this point, The Walking Dead is in this formula where it's like, we found somewhere safe. Oh, it's
Is
destroyed. We're
is
on the
this the
road.
season where in the back half it's almost like toying the idea of like everything's sort of back to normal?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, I'm with you then. Like I wasn't totally sure if we were 5 or 6 there, but
Yeah, it was
yeah, I'm
5, I
with you on
believe.
this season in that
Yeah, and
case.
it's
Like,
fascinating because you see that the people that have been out there in the walls have this like heightened anxiety and PTSD and trauma, and they're trying to like reintegrate with this society of people who the worst thing that happened to them is the internet went down, right? Like they still have
right.
power, they still have water, like they've been living this normal
It's a question of like how do you go
old
back,
life.
right? Like mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Also with Rick, I totally agree. Like he's been on this journey since whether it's Lori's death or a little before that of this battle with his own humanity, which becomes a central theme up until the
Mm-hmm.
moment he leaves the show.
Yeah, I think it's when
And
he kills Shane is when that starts
yeah,
for
so
sure.
he he has the actions that he takes at Terminus, and then having to be walked back from from finishing it, and then now thrown into this environment where now you're just supposed to be like the Rick of what 2 years ago again,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really interesting dynamic to watch
Mm-hmm.
in within that mini story. And that's one of the great things about this show is that there is the big story arc, but there's also a lot of smaller subtle things going on
For
with
sure.
the character that are, I think, really really good. So you've
Yeah.
got this one as your best one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really think this is top of S,
i,
especially since
I can
like
go with that.
there's just so many moments in this. Like, there's so many you can point to and talk about. The one I want to have recording move is just him being a constable, him and Michonne being like the security guards,
Mm-hmm.
the cops essentially for this community, and you see Rick like kind of abusing his power, right? Where he's really going hard after Pete, the doctor, and being super vigilant about protecting people from him, which granted, like he should have been. Like the dude was an alcoholic, he was a domestic abuser, all around piece of shit. But the interesting question is it's like how much of Rick being against him is because of a moral reason and because he wants to sleep with his wife. Right?
Yeah.
So, which is interesting because I've never thought about this. It's an almost like it puts him as Shane. Like he finds
Yeah.
himself in Shane's position, in Shane's worldview.
Yep.
So,
Because he's now the person that's like, I know what it's going to take to stay safe.
mm-hmm.
And the people who are in Alexandria are like horrified because
Oh yeah.
they've lived a relatively sheltered existence since the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of the apocalypse. So,
And it takes them until like the last minute of that season to really get it.
mm-hmm.
Once Pete kills like the woman who runs that community, he kills her husband. And then you get, I think, probably the second best cliffhanger of the series where Morgan shows up right at that exact moment. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
Rick, is that you? And you're like, oh my God.
Hey,
All right.
what is next?
Season 6. It's looking like. Moving along here. Season 6 is a weird one for me. You started us on season 6. I don't know what you think.
This is the one where we get like Negan at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
split season because the first half is so action packed and like literally all takes place in a day, by the way, which is nuts as they're trying to redirect that massive horde. The wolves attack in that vulnerable moment, and then you get No Way Out where they're covered in guts doing the guts trick to try and sneak around, and then eventually Rick rallies all of Alexandria to clear out like a whole horde of walkers. And then season 6 just kind of like meanders
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
explores all of these different communities, right? When even on the poster it says
Yep.
like a larger world. And I
Larger
think
world.
like they introduce so many factions at one point that it gets like the Game of Thrones problem, where it's like I'm having a hard time remembering who these people are and deciding if I should care, right?
Yeah, this is so when I said before that the show gets bloated at a point, like with characters, this is what I'm talking about.
I think this is the peak of it being bloated.
And I think that leads in part to some of what we see in the next season with some characters being offed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to cull the herd, so to speak. But
Which you need to do, right? Because if you're going to
yeah,
have a massive 2-season long war, you have to set up some middle of the road characters to take bullets, unfortunately.
yep. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I don't think it's great. I think it's probably in good. I don't know where you at.
I like where you have it now at good, above 11 and between 1. I
Mm-hmm.
think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Okay. So, because I think the big topic here is the next one, right?
Oh, yeah. Season 7, which,
So
what a
let's
doozy.
let's talk the moment right away because this season kicks off like it's not effing around.
No, it's not.
The
Which they fucking
biggest
better not have.
moment,
Because remember, we got that cliffhanger. We didn't know who died for like
right?
6 months or 8.
And it turns out it wasn't just one.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that moment? Because let's talk about that right away. Because it is the biggest and probably most divisive moment in the history of the show. A lot of people that I know stopped watching the show right here.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Where are you at?
I think it's also the most iconic moment of the show,
Same.
though. Like, it's so memorable and it's so impactful. And I think it's like Negan's first episode, the monologue and then of season 6, and then this episode is like one of the best introductions to a villain ever because you immediately hate this guy. and he's so much more powerful than anyone Rick has ever faced, right? Like the governor, and Rick, I would say those groups are pretty evenly matched, right? Same thing with Rick's group, the Survivors and Terminus. At this point, like Rick is and his group are essentially like a very small resistance against like a fascist government.
Well, that's the thing. So the governor has a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Negan has an army,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very different, right? And you're right, it
Yeah.
is fascistic, and it's it's a different style. And I would argue the governor had a lot of traits of that as well, just in a more with a smile.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Negan's
but
got the scale to it
yeah,
though.
yes, and I know Glenn is a beloved character, and the fact the backlash about that moment just speaks to how beloved Glenn was
Mm-hmm.
on the show. And but would Negan on screen have gotten the label as this guy, this like horrible badass, if he had just killed two like middle of the road, we kind of like but kind of don't care characters, you
Yeah,
know?
it had to be someone really impactful so that you would feel the grief they were feeling week to week. You had to have that loss, right? That being said, from this point on, this season meanders so hard.
It does.
So hard. I was honestly shocked when I found out how long the war actually lasts in canon because it feels like months. Um, and I think everyone was really excited for season 7 going into it because the
Mhm.
all out war arc in the comics is great and really intense and really action packed. And then we realized, like, oh, this is going to be a whole season. Like, oh no, a whole season before we even get to the war. Like, I remember I listened to an old episode of kind of funny podcast a couple weeks ago where they were talking about watching The Walking Dead, predicting it like as it was airing, and
Mhm.
they were like, I mean, you got to imagine like the first half of season 7 is the all-out war against Negan, and then the back half of season 7 is like the world after, right? And I'm sitting there like, hindsight's 2020. Oh my god, do I wish?
Yeah. It does meander. I
And
think
it,
I
it's
get I think one thing I just really enjoy is just how good of a character Negan is
mhm,
and how well played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan
for sure.
um he is, and that like helps me get through a lot of it, but
Yeah.
I 100% get it. Go ahead and say what you were going to say. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say like we were talking about the problem of or we both have about this show just taking these moments where these bottle episodes where it focuses on a character and then kills them off or kind of goes nowhere. And I feel like this is the most often and the most egregious this season does it. I feel like awful feels really harsh, but
Yeah, I don't feel like it's that.
I'm kind of there. I really am. Like I
Are you?
on
Okay.
rewatches, I will skip this entire season from
Really?
the
Okay.
premiere on. Yeah, like I don't know. I don't need it. I don't think it really serves us well.
Okay. I mean, I'll defer there because, like, after the premiere, I don't feel strongly, and I guess that is sort of an indictment on a show that's designed to make you
Mhm.
feel strongly. You
And
know?
after the premiere, I don't really remember like there are seasons where I can tell you like several entire episodes or like the order of them, right? I mean, there was one night I was at a gay bar and they were playing season 5 on the TV, and I shit you not, I just like stood there and watched like 3 episodes on mute in a pro because I was just like, oh my god, this show is so great. Like
Hmm.
just and season 7, I just feel like I don't remember anything other than just like the dread. And they really did do that well. Like I know it
Yeah.
was a season that was supposed to be such a downer and you're supposed to feel the characters at their lowest. But it got to a point where it was just like not fun anymore. You know, like you get to 9 p.m. on a Sunday and you're like, all right, let's watch Daryl get tortured.
Is
Like
this is the? Did you used to watch all of the Talking Dead too?
about 50-50.
Okay.
Because I was young enough that I had to be in bed for school. But if it was an important enough episode, my mom was like, "I'll make an exception. We got to process this shit." So,
Because I feel like this is a season where a lot of people might have stopped watching that,
mhm.
and because you're right, it does. it's just not focused as well as it could be.
Mhm.
And I just feel like they're trying to milk. They knew they had a cash cow, Hayden, and they're trying to milk as much as they can out of the most popular storylines the show has or the
Mhm.
comics have. So there you go. But all right. How about the next one, season 8?
I think the front half of it struggles a lot with some of the same problems as, um, the season 7, but we get into the all-out war pretty quick. Like, Rick is there shooting people up like he's doing the damn thing. We get some really epic gunfights and action sequences, and it all builds to, like, Carl's death, which is probably the biggest one I think the show has ever faced as far
Yeah.
as stakes and how that changes characters. Because, like, we were all under the impression that, like, Carl Grimes is the future of this series, right? In the
Well, it's a
comic books,
massive departure from the comics. Yeah.
yeah, and but the comics hadn't even ended at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was still thinking, oh, like the old man Carl's theory is going to come to pass. Like it's all going to end with Carl being, the president of the United States or something like that in the future. Um, and we don't get that, and it's such a huge moment, and that's when we see Rick being absolutely ruthless and losing his humanity for a bit, and it takes him until the season finale to learn to like show some mercy and to end this cycle and to not be the reason why groups keep fighting and homes keep getting destroyed forever. Like I think this is peak philosophical Rick, peak
Yeah.
monologue Rick, doing a lot of speeches, really
Yes.
coming into his own as a leader. So
Within that, I think, Carl died because of his humanity. Largely, he was trying to help someone,
mhm.
right? And that's such an interesting like play off of what Rick then goes and does. And Carl's plea at the end was basically don't lose that, you know.
Mhm.
And it was like this little thing planted in the back of Rick's mind and just kept surfacing. And then once the pure like rage of this loss is past, it does work its way to the forefront with him, and I think he really tries to make an effort. It's it's a good season, but I don't know how good.
That's where I'm at too. It's tough. Like, where do you place this in the good tier? I would say probably between 6 and 11.
That's what I was gonna say. It's better than 11, but I don't
Mhm.
know if I can go higher than that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, how about 9?
9, I think, is like if 7 and 8 are where they lost the plot, I think 9 is like the ultimate comeback season.
Me too. And I'll tell you something. 9 has the moment in this show more so than Negan that literally made me stop and like put my hand over my mouth and be like, "Oh my god." You
What
know,
was it?
the heads on the pikes at the end.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, the
It
Whisperers,
was
man.
like devastating.
The way that they get introduced, I think it's really tough to follow up the next villain after Negan, and they did it. Like they made the
Yeah.
Whisperers terrifying. They made them effective villains. With that Pike's moment, and there was the mystery of like that shit was terrifying, man. Honestly, like especially if you're a comics like not a comics reader, you don't know the
Yeah.
Whisperers. You're like,
Because I
why are the
didn't. Yeah.
Walkers? You didn't know about the Whisperers, okay? So
Yeah.
you're like, why are the Walkers talking? Why are
Yep.
they whispering? Why are they walking in these weird patterns? Like, what is going on? And it's this sense of like it makes the Walkers terrifying again in a way they haven't been the main threat like since season 2.
But yeah, that moment is how you build up. Because the kid, right? I forget his
Henry.
name. Yeah. Like
Hmm.
we had been slowly getting invested more and more and more in him throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, they treated him like the new Carl, right?
Yep.
He was kind of the face of the younger generation.
And it was all to give us this payoff, and it worked
Mhm.
because it was the last head you saw,
Mhm.
and it was just devastating. It was crushing. Like I that got a reaction out of me like I don't do very often watching TV,
Yeah.
and that speaks to how great this storyline was. I'm with you. This is a huge comeback for the show.
And the back half, or really, I guess back 2/3, where they kind of do the time skip is great, and you get introduced to
Yeah,
the new world and the flash forward, right? And
the post Rick
there's new,
world. Yeah.
right? There's new communities, and people are interacting in different ways, and Judith is around and is kind of a little badass,
Well,
to
and the
be
show
honest.
really needed that, Hayden, I think.
A
Like,
reinvention for
yeah,
sure.
it needed that opportunity to just have a clean wipe the slate a little bit and be able to just do some things and explain it away by a time jump. Um,
Hmm.
what did you think? I guess we should mention Rick's departure, right?
Of course.
How did you feel that was handled?
Really incredible set of episodes.
Hmm.
I think it could have been more impactful if they didn't market the shit out of like, here's a live countdown to how long until Rick leaves the show. Um, but I understand why you do that,
I
right? To
think
get
the
audiences to come
viewership
back.
was waning already, though. So
Right. So I,
that's
I
to
feel
get people
I
to
feel
watch.
exactly. And it worked for some
Mhm.
people. Um, and I think it's a really satisfying conclusion to his arc. Obviously he comes back later, but at the time, conclusion to his arc, right? We see him being peak old man leader Rick with the white beard and
Mhm.
kind of doing bureaucracy and politicking with all different communities and trying to build the bridge and having the intent to sacrifice himself and sacrifice that connection to prevent the Walker herd from going not even to his own community, right? Just to one of the other ones, which
Mhm.
is just really shows you where he's at and where the world's at and how much things have evolved and healed. And that finale with him, like his departure episode, is like peak fan service, but also peak storytelling.
And it's the iconic shot of him on the bridge, right? Holding,
Mhm.
in the classic Rick pistol stance,
Mhm. Mhm.
um
There's so many iconic shots from that episode because you get him whenever he blacks out, he has these kind of memories. Not memories, but he sees people from his life talking to him and they are telling him each what part of his personality he needs at that moment. Like Shane's
we see Shane,
ruthlessness.
right? Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
Herschel's civility. Sasha, I think a lot of people think was a weird pick for him to talk to, but I think it makes sense to show just
Yeah.
how much of an effect he had on people's lives, even these kind of tertiary characters that whose legacies we don't think about all that much.
Mhm.
And it's a more emotionally satisfying and impactful conclusion to an arc that I think like most series get for like their finale.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that. And you know what? If the show had ended there, would you have been okay?
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
too.
I think it was a satisfying end to his character, but then again, I feel like The Walking Dead was never really just about Rick Grimes. It was about this larger world and telling, as
Yeah.
Kirkman always said, the zombie movie that doesn't end. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, ooh, I honestly feel like S.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And that works out beautifully because now we have 4 up top, which is our normal rule.
Ooh, true. Do
So
you think it goes an S above 3?
yeah, after you've
I
said
do.
what you said, yeah. I personally like 3 a lot, but
Yeah.
I
Switch it
can
over. Drag it over one.
no, I'm good. I think we're fine with it here. I
All
I
right.
can like there are things Hayden that I really really love that I know aren't like holy shit, this is the best version of this ever,
Fair
but I still
enough.
really like it,
And this is one of those.
This is one of those. Like, for
Mhm.
example, earlier this year, I really loved the movie Monkey Man, and I still do. And I know it's not
Mhm.
going to be a Best Picture finalist, and I don't give a shit. Like, I still love it,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And season 3 is kind of that. Um, so anyway, we have 4 up top. That's our standard
Our Mount
practice with
Rushmore.
these. Yeah, our Mount Rushmore
Yep.
of The Walking Dead. Now let's just rank them real quick. So,
Okay.
is 9 better than 4?
That's 3 next to it on the
Or, I'm
left.
sorry, is 9 better than 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think it stays there.
Is 2 better than what's that? 5?
Sick. 5, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think so. I would go 5,
So
honestly.
is this? Yeah, I'm with you on that. Is this where we're staying?
I think so for those 4, yeah.
Okay.
Looks right to me. And I'm okay with where everything else falls as well, below that if you are.
I'm really happy we got a late in the show's run season up top,
That's that good.
because normally when you do something like this with a show that has a bunch of seasons, you've got a bunch of early to middle seasons way up top.
And it's
And
almost like a
then,
linear fall off at that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we had, and we're not alone on this. Like, fans, for the most part, really like season 9.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like this is a good list, and we didn't bury a lot of stuff. You know, we had one down there, not because of the moment either,
No.
but everything after it.
Yeah.
So
And it's a pretty solid average. I mean, we only have 2 seasons that are meh or below. So
that's a great distribution. If you've
mhm.
got the biggest groups in the middle, which normally is true, right? And then
Mhm.
up top.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's pretty good. I'll take that. And then down on the bottom, don't ignore those because we're just not factoring those in this time.
Yeah. We'll get there,
Yeah,
promise.
we will.
Once we get a chance to watch all 9 seasons of Fear.
God, I
Someday.
know. I've only got like 4 left, but or 3
Mhm.
maybe. I don't know. But anyway. Okay. Shall we call it here?
Sounds good.
Hey, and we're always gonna do this in like a half an hour, and we're always here like 50 minutes later. We're like,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
alright.
that's
It's
all right.
we're passionate.
Yeah.
Got a
Okay.
lot to
Well,
say.
let us know what you think in comments. Let us know
Mhm.
what your favorite season is, if what we really messed up on, and we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds good.
Thanks everybody.
Take care,
Have a great
y'all.
day. Bye.